This is BBC News with the latest headlines for viewers in the UK and around the world. A major U-turn by the UK government. Its smartphone coronavirus tracing app for England is put on hold amid doubts that it can do the job properly.
I've got to say on this taking the knee thing, I don't know, maybe it's got a broader history, but seems to be taken from the Game of Thrones.
The UK's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says he has full respect for anti-racism campaigners after he is strongly criticised for his comments. Celebration among young US immigrants as the Supreme Court rules against President Trump's bid to end a programme protecting them from deportation. A flypast of the Red Arrows and their French equivalent, La Patrouille, in London, 80 years after General Charles de Gaulle's famous wartime broadcast.
We meet again, don't know where, don't know when.
And Dame Vera Lynn, the British singer who became known as the Force's sweetheart during World War II, has died at the age of 103. Back if you're watching in the UK or around the world. Plans to ease further the lockdowns in both Northern Ireland and Scotland have been announced today. In a moment we'll have the detail on the changes in Scotland with our correspondent Sarah Smith, who's in Glasgow. But first to Belfast and our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy.
Well, Northern Ireland has become the first part of the UK today to announce a major change to the social distancing rules. The devolved government has announced that for children in schools, social distancing can be reduced from 2 metres to 1 metre. Now, that is something some teachers had been calling for a while, saying 2 metres in a classroom just wasn't really very realistic. And the idea is by changing this rule, it will allow full classrooms of children to return here in Northern Ireland when schools fully reopen at the end of August. For adults, though, that rule will remain at 2 metres. And as you say, another announcement today here, much anticipated, and that is hairdressers. They will be able to reopen along with barbers and beauty salons on July the 6th, as long as they still have some safety measures in place. And another announcement here too today for people who are shielding. The Stormont executive has said there can be a pause in shielding from July the 31st, and people who are affected will be getting letters soon to explain exactly what that means for them. So quite a lot of announcements today here in Northern Ireland that are certainly going to affect people's lives, and we just see Northern Ireland once again moving slightly ahead of other parts of the UK in easing its lockdown.
From tomorrow, a total of 3 households will be allowed to meet up together as long as they're outside with a maximum of 8 people. You will be able to nip into the loo if you visit someone in their garden, and couples who live apart, as long as at least one of them lives alone, will now be able to meet indoors and stay overnight. High street shops and shops that have an entrance onto the street will be able to open from the 29th of June, but not indoor shopping centres. Face masks will be compulsory on public transport from Monday and could be compulsory in shops when they open at the end of the month. And there's no date yet for pubs and restaurants with outdoor space to reopen. We had thought that would open soon, but the Scottish Government says there is emerging evidence that these places can be hotspots for the transmission of the virus. So this is a lot more cautious than in other parts of the UK, and some businesses are deeply frustrated about that, but Nicola Sturgeon will make no apology because she's always said she is not prepared to take any unnecessary risks.
Thanks to Sarah Smith there in Glasgow and Emma Vardy in Belfast. Now, Indian officials say all their soldiers involved in a clash with Chinese troops in the northern Ladakh region have been accounted for. The statement came after media reports said some of the soldiers were missing, possibly taken into custody by the Chinese during the brawl on Monday night. Indian officials say 20 of their troops were killed and several injured when they were attacked with stones and clubs studded with nails. This image was passed to the BBC by a senior Indian military official who said these were the weapons used by the Chinese. Since then, funerals have been held for the Indian soldiers. The foreign ministers from India and China have spoken to calm nerves on both sides, but each blaming the other for the deaths, which happened here in the Galwan Valley. It's an extremely remote region of the Himalayas. Amir Pirzada has travelled close to the area for us and sent this report.
I'm right now in Leh town of Ladakh. Leh being high altitude town in whole of this region. The height of Leh right now is more than 14,000 feet. The flashpoint and the points and the regions where the face-off between Chinese forces and Indian forces have been happening are Pangong region and Galwan Valley. If we talk about the geography of this region, the Pangong region falls on my right side, which is around 160 kilometers from here, and straight on my front is Galwan Valley, which is more than 250 kilometers from here. Indian Army said the Indian forces and senior officials were meeting with Chinese troops to defuse the situation. That's when clashes happened and 20 soldiers were killed. So far, Indian Army has only released the number of 20 dead Indian soldiers, but no number of injured have been released yet. And Indian Army has also not revealed the reason for those clashes. Neither do China. Indian Army said that China also suffered casualties, which China did not confirm. There are reports that when the clashes took place between Indian soldiers and Chinese soldiers, not a single bullet was fired. These were clashes which were hand-to-hand fights, scuffles in which both the forces, they have used sticks and stones to beat each other. So things are unclear as of now. There's no clarity what was the reason behind the clashes, how did it escalated, because before that, both the countries were saying that things are normal and under control, things are stable. In fact, the villages which fall around the flashpoints where the face-off is taking place, the mobile connectivity, it has been suspended. From last few weeks, there's no mobile connectivity, so we are not able to reach out to those villages to know the current situations.
Yeah, dangerous situation there on the Indian-Chinese border. Now, the death of African-American George Floyd in Minneapolis led to demonstrations around the world. Here in the UK, it's also prompted black people to share experiences of their treatment by the police. According to the latest figures, black people are almost 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people, and 3 times more likely to be arrested. The government has ordered a commission into racial inequality, but many are calling for action, not words. Clive Myrie has been speaking to some of those affected.
Racism can manifest as crude, but when subtle, it causes the same pain. It's 12 o'clock on a bright summer's day and a motorist is stopped by a police patrol in Cambridgeshire.
And the reason I stopped you is when you came out of the barns, no offence to you, but you're a black male, okay? I'm not going to lie to you.
So it's racist when you stop me?
I'm not saying that at all. The reason I've stopped you, I'll explain if you let me finish.
The driver's name is Ryan and he doesn't want to show his face. Police have stopped him more than 20 times in the last several years. He says the video can be summed up in one word.
Disgusting. Absolutely horrified. When I very first came to Ely, I got stopped by a police officer just before I started driving. I was on foot. And he said, "You're a new face around here, I haven't seen you before, but I'm just going to give you a little warning. Just because you're black, it's more likely you will get stopped by the police around here."
The footage is 5 years old, but George Floyd's death in America prompted Ryan's sister to put it online, where it's been seen millions of times. The Independent Office for Police Conduct is investigating Cambridgeshire Police. Countless inquiries and reports tell us again and again racism is a problem in our society. The Brixton riots led to Lord Scarman's indictment of racial disadvantage in inner cities. The killing of Stephen Lawrence saw Macpherson's castigation of the Met Police as institutionally racist. Discrimination in the workplace, deaths in police custody, bias across wider society, and the criminal justice system all got the same treatment. Bias in schools, and the Windrush Review. Yet, few recommendations have been implemented, and now more and more videos are appearing online highlighting problems with the police.
Right, listen, open the vehicle please, or we are going to have to put the windows in.
Naomi Bennett's car has been stopped late at night. Officers have blocked her path with their patrol vehicle in what's called a hard stop.
There's something in here that you are trying to hide.
Like what?
Step out of the vehicle.
Frightened, she refuses to comply and is arrested. Nothing's found in her car, and she's now suing the police.
Had they not did a hard stop in front of me, their approach had been different, then I think it would have had a very different outcome. But I did actually explain to the officer that I am scared.
For what though? I don't understand what I've done.
The Metropolitan Police says it's assessing her complaint. In the wake of George Floyd's death, too many black people here say a few bad officers are tainting everyone. Events in America may have triggered a reckoning on both sides of the Atlantic. Clive Myrie, BBC News.
Donald Trump's White House is making a last-ditch attempt to stop a book by the president's former national security advisor, John Bolton, from being published. Among several damaging allegations made against the administration, Mr. Bolton accuses President Trump of soliciting the help of China's leader Xi Jinping at a meeting last June to help him win the upcoming presidential election. President Trump, he writes, was pleading with Xi to ensure he'd win, having stressed the importance of farmers and increased Chinese purchases of soybeans and wheat in the electoral outcome. Mr. Trump urged China to buy as many American farm products as it could. In an interview with ABC News, John Bolton went even further, giving his view on the president's relationship with Vladimir Putin.
I think Putin thinks he can play him like a fiddle. I think Putin is smart, tough. I think he sees that he's not faced with a serious adversary here. I don't think he's worried about Donald Trump.
John Bolton speaking to ABC News. Katty Kay is in Washington for us. It's worth reminding our audience, Katty, that this is an insider. This is someone who has served in various Republican administrations. He's a regular on Fox News. So how damaging is it?
Look, he's a real conservative, and as you say, he served in previous administrations as well, and what he says in the book is pretty damning. He calls the president unfit for office. There's those comments about asking the Chinese to help him win the election. He also, John Bolton says that President Trump seemed to be in favor of China building prison camps for Muslims in the country. He also says that he had he made obstruction of justice a way of life. So, look, it's pretty withering, but Democrats have a pretty complicated relationship with John Bolton because he is a neoconservative, because he is very conservative. He's not somebody particularly you like. And so they have this kind of there's this weird situation this morning where you've got kind of liberals and Democrats in Washington touting the work of somebody they would have thought was not somebody from their political camp in order to get at President Trump. And it was interesting listening to Nancy Pelosi this morning, echoing the words of somebody she might used to have seen as an enemy, John Bolton. Take a listen to Nancy Pelosi.
President Trump is clearly ethically unfit and intellectually unprepared to be the president of the United States. It didn't seem to matter to John Bolton. He chose royalty over patriotism. And so he's going to make money off of his book, I guess. And so we'll make a judgment. I'll be meeting with the chairs to make a judgment.
Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, just a short time ago. There is a pattern here of people who've left the administration and lifted the lid on it. James Mattis, John Bolton, H.R. McMaster, Rex Tillerson, one Anthony Scaramucci, who joins us in Long Island in New York. Anthony, it's good to have you with us on the programme. Do you recognise some of the themes in this book?
Yeah, look, it's the classic stuff, and I wrote about this in the Washington Post a few months ago. It's Trump employment syndrome. You try to like President Trump, you end up working for him, you experience the blowback, the insecurity, the shrapnel, the litany of lies, and then you start various coping mechanisms. For me, I got ejected very quickly like an Austin Powers villain, so I didn't have to stay in the administration long. But those other guys, whether it's General Kelly, Jim Mattis, I interviewed General Kelly a few weeks ago. He said he agreed with General Mattis. Ambassador Bolton is saying the same sorts of things. And we have a schism now in the Republican Party that is way worse than the Ronald Reagan, Gerald Ford schism in 1976. And so we have somebody that's hijacked the party, is using the personality skill set of full-blown demagoguery to scare and intimidate other public officials that don't have the principles or the backbone to stand up to him. And then there's a group of us that are like, okay, listen, there's a disaster going on. We're patriots first. We're partisans way last. Let's figure out a way to remove him so that there's not further damage to our global alliances, to the perception of America, but also to the reality of America, because what President Trump is a demagogic tribal leader, and we need somebody right now that can unify and heal the country.
So Anthony, Democrats aren't happy because John Bolton kept this for a book and didn't go to Congress, insist that he was going to spill all of this during the impeachment process. Do you think it would have made any difference if John Bolton had gone to Congress and said, listen, all those things about Ukraine that you're saying, that President Trump tried to get Ukraine to help him get reelected, actually, I saw him do it with China too. Would it have made any difference to Republicans in the Senate?
So, Katty, I believe it would not have made any difference. I don't think they could have had a smoking gun and cameras on him. They still were voting to acquit him. That was the politics of expediency. You know, John Kennedy wrote a book about the Senate called Profiles in Courage. He said it was the thinnest book that he ever wrote because there's just not a lot of courage out there. So I mean, that's what went on there. And by the way, I just want to say this to both of you and to the audience, you know, there's a great level of sadness in having this conversation with you. This is not like a retribution conversation. It's not a retribution conversation for Ambassador Bolton. You should go to the interview where I interviewed John Kelly on our SALT Talks, and you could see the expression on his face as one of great sadness. We're not sitting here as disgruntled employees filing a grievance against our employer. We're sitting here saying, okay, just look at the facts on the table. Look at the style, look at the mannerisms, look at the impetuosity of policy, look at the failed COVID-19 response. We're headed for 4 more years of disaster with him at the helm, and I think we have a responsibility to speak up about it.
Well, so, Anthony, talking about that 4 more years, you're quoted in the New York Times today saying that you're not even sure that President Trump wants the job. Do you think he does? Do you think he wants to be reelected?
I don't know. I mean, I think he does in the sense that his ego would like him to be a successful two-termed president. I think if he loses the election, he'll put himself in the basket of quote unquote losers, and he hates that term loser. So I think he does from that perspective. But what I was really saying to Maggie Haberman is that I don't think he wants the job in terms of what his skill set is, in terms of applying it to the job, and what the cause and effect has happened to him. And what I said in that article, he's a modern day LBJ. Everything is going wrong, and he doesn't have the empathy. He doesn't have the skill set. He doesn't have the unifying qualities to put the country back together in an hour of its need. And so this is going to be a very frustrating process for him. And Katty, you live here. You know the poll numbers are not good for him. I just did a call with Senator Romney and Paul Ryan. Paul said on a call that, you know, it's 2-1 Joe Biden now in Wisconsin. So it's going to be very difficult for President Trump to do what he did last time. You know, that was a very narrow victory last time.
Just on that point, Anthony, coming back to your interview with John Kelly, Jim Mattis speaking out in recent days, do you think people on the right are now looking at the poll numbers and seeing the path back to the White House narrowing and now starting to take a different tack and starting to come out and express their views on this president?
On the margin, yes. You know, and I think that's the goal of some of these PACs, the one of which I started, the Right Side PAC, to be on the right side of history. On the margin, yes. I do think that there is a opportunity for that. But I don't think for a very large group of his ardent supporters is that opportunity, because they see this as a culture war. They see him and Bill Barr as fingers in the dike, preventing hordes of people that are going to come and take their guns and tear up the culture of what they see as America. And I think we have to explain to those people that is certainly not going to happen. There's enough going on in America for all of us, and we can live our lives the way we want to. That's the virtue of the Constitution and the virtue of freedom. But we have to remove President Trump. And again, we have to do it at the ballot box, Katty, because there was no way those senators, but for Senator Romney, were going to do the right thing there and vote for the conviction. So even if, you know, John Bolton came in with recordings and photographs, I still think that wouldn't have happened. So I think people are being too tough on him related to that. He offered himself for the testimony. Right. It got declined. And so we're here now, and I think he thinks that that book is going to be a very valuable treatise to go into the re-elect with, and certainly I'm going to be using that book for sure.
Anthony, it's always good to get your thoughts. Thank you for coming back on.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Good to have you.
Thank you, guys.
Let's bring in Ron Christie, former advisor in George Bush's White House. Ron, good to have you with us. Hello to you. Just finishing up on John Bolton's book, I mean, the president's saying today, you know, it's got lots of classified information on it. They're thinking about criminal charges against John Bolton. Are they going to get anywhere with that?
Well, good evening to you, Christian. Always good to see you. I am a little perplexed by this. The White House has had the manuscript for Ambassador Bolton's book for several months now. And the president has been saying of late that any conversation with him is inherently classified. And I can tell you, for having worked in the White House, that's not true. A lot of people, most people who work in the White House don't have a security clearance. So the notion that you're going to say that if you have a conversation with the president of the Oval Office, it's confidential, that's a wrong way of looking at it. The right way to look at it is those conversations should be confidential. I certainly did not go out and go on television or disclose to my friends the conversations I had with the president because I thought that was wrong. But I think Mr. Bolton and Mr. Trump in this sense deserve each other, given where we are with the release of this book.
Anthony was talking about the narrowing path to the White House. Big day on Saturday, of course, because he's got a big rally in Tulsa in Oklahoma, the Great American Comeback, as he dubbed it. 19,000 people locked in a hall. Shall I show you the map? The coronavirus cases that are surging across several US states, and 10 of them are now recording their highest number of new daily cases since the pandemic began over the last week. Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Oregon, Texas and South Carolina all counted record highs. Oklahoma, where President Trump is planning that rally, also one of those states. Ron, is this a good idea?
Well, I think it depends on your politics. If you look at the amount of tests that we now have available, obviously you're going to see the numbers spike because more people are being tested. My cynicism here, Christian, is that the Reverend Al Sharpton is going down to the same venue tomorrow to have a rally. So I'm just questioning whether if you're black and you want to have a rally in favor of Juneteenth, that's okay and there are no health concerns. But if the President of the United States wants to have a venue, identical venue, and a rally the next day, then somehow people's health are at risk. So you've got to be consistent both ways. We should follow the science, but if it's good enough for Sharpton to do it, I think it's good enough for the President of the United States.
I think that the science would say have rallies outside or protests outside, and everybody should be wearing masks. They will be handing out masks at the Trump rally. I understand it won't be mandatory, though. Look, it's been a super busy news day, Ron. We've had the book come out, but I also want to touch on this Supreme Court ruling, because for the second time in a week, the US Supreme Court has ruled against the Trump administration. We had that ruling on LGBT rights, employment rights earlier, and today they ruled basically in favor of Dreamers, to allow Dreamers to stay in the country, at least on a temporary basis. After that ruling, here's what President Trump tweeted. These horrible and politically charged decisions coming out of the Supreme Court are shotgun blasts into the face of people that are proud to call themselves Republicans or conservatives. We know the president's not going to like this, but shotgun blasts into the face of people that call themselves conservatives, it's not particularly helpful language, is it, Ron?
Good afternoon to you, Katty. Not only is it not particularly helpful, it's certainly not presidential. I don't agree with Justice Roberts here. This was a 5-4 decision. Justice Roberts sided with the liberals in the court. An executive order issued by the President of the United States cannot contradict a statute written by Congress. And that's exactly what happened with this Dreamer case. That being said, the president swore an oath. I swore an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And there are going to be cases, and there are going to be times that you don't agree with the Supreme Court. I don't agree with them here, but as an officer of the court, you salute the flag and say, well, it's settled law, let's move along.
Yeah, and he did elect, of course, or did send 2 of the justices to the Supreme Court, didn't he? Ron, good to see you. Thank you very much for that. Still no sign of us making a comeback on our programme, Katty. But I've been forced out of the garden this week, just so you're up to speed, into the house by the rain. And I've been sort of looking at some of the social media stuff, and this made me laugh. These are the pictures of people turning their politicians into the opposite sex. So we've had Beatrice Johnson, we've had Arnold Merkel. Can we have Arnold Merkel? There we go, with beard. All right. Emily Macron.
Yeah.
Quite fetching, Emily Macron.
It's...
Donald Trump. No thanks. And Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
Kim is actually a unisex name.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know what I've done? I thought we'd have a go at it.
Do you think any of those people are going to thank you for showing that, Christian?
No.
I mean, I'm a little worried that we've shown the North Korean leader because.
But I guess they know all these people anyway. So I've done us. I took the liberty of doing us. So this is you, Kurt K. Which made me laugh.
Seriously?
As a Burnley fan, right? Well, look at this. Look at this.
That doesn't look anything like me.
Sam Vokes, the Welsh striker, the former Burnley striker. You look just like him.
Yeah. Do you think that does not look like me?
There it
Okay,
is,
so
look,
wait,
there's Sam
because you
Vokes.
did that to me. Christian, because you did that to me, we're going to end with the picture of you. This is Christina Fraser.
To be honest, I look like that in
This
2
is-
more weeks. I just need a central party.
Sure.